What's up, YouTube? Here with another Dimir league. I'm sure y'all are getting like extraordinarily sick of Dimir, which is kind of funny because it's still like the most viewed archetype on my channel, the most commented on, the most liked, which is absolutely crazy. For whatever reason, YouTube goes crazy over Dimir Shadow. But we got another league. Obviously, we've had two straight trophies with the deck. Gotta run it back again. Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So we're going through a another league. This was live on stream, so if you want to see the VOD for it, we'll have like the description down or the link to the Twitch channel in the description down below. Otherwise, no real changes from the last list. Like I said, if it's gotten two straight trophies, might as well see what else it can do, right? The only other thing I want to say before we get into the gameplay is y'all have been awesome at supporting the channel. The amount of views and subscriptions here has been blowing up. Absolutely thrilled. I don't like doing a ton of call to actions, but if you are enjoying the channel, enjoying the commentary, the gameplay, anything like that, feel free to hit the subscribe button down below. Subscriptions on YouTube don't cost you a penny. They just let you know whenever new videos are coming out, so you can come check them out. We're trying to grow the channel as much as we can, trying to get these videos out. And the best way to show support is to drop a subscription below and let us know that you're enjoying this sort of content. Otherwise, let's hop into the video. So, same Dimir Shadow we've been running, trying out these Brian-born cutthroats. Go ahead and hop into round number one again through the magic of up that way CGI. Bam. So, round number one. We do lose a die roll, but we got a hand of like good interaction, removal spell. We got a threat eventually. Watery Grave, so I have no idea what we're up against. Could be a mirror match. That would be pretty sweet. Could be something out of the blue like Mill. Well, worst case scenario, we do have a removal spell for the crab. And if they mill us a bunch, we might be able to just drop a turn 2 Murktide. That's kind of our hope here. We're kind of like forcing this fetch with the fatal push. So they are just going to put a bunch of cards in our yard. And the fact that they don't have an archive trap right there is huge. So now we get down a Murktide. We get to untap with Counterspell, Drown in the Lock. Our opponent can't drown our Murktide. Well, they can now, but couldn't before. So we're just going to hope to like close the game out before they can kill off our Murktide. We do have the ability to fight over a Drown in the Lock on their side. And now that we pick up our 4th land, we can fight over 2 Drown in the Locks. And as long as I don't put myself in a position where I have to tap off of my counter spells, we're good. So that's the power of Murktide in your Shadow deck, is you can close out games extraordinarily fast. Very reminiscent of Gurmag Angler in the days of old. Sideboarding against sideboarding against Mill. I'm usually taking out like some Street Wraiths, boarding in extra Stubborn Denial, Fluster Storm, stuff like that. Street Wraith just being like a 2 mana, make your card one or make your deck one less card isn't the greatest thing. But we do keep a hand that's got an answer to a crab. So that's about all we can ask for. We get to untap with like a Drown in the Lock or flash in a Brian-born Cutthroat if our opponent doesn't do anything too scary. Looks like what we're gonna do. Everybody wants to know if Brian-born Cutthroat is the real deal or not, so might as well try to show it off, right? Get in a Cutthroat attack, and now we get to hold up counter magic on their turn. If they don't do anything, we just consider. That helps grow the Cutthroat. Find counter spells, and now if we have to Stubborn Denial something on their turn, that puts the second counter on the Cutthroat. Grow it to a 4/3, so we have like a hard negate for 1 mana. So even though they cast a removal spell on our turn, there's a pretty good chance they're going to tap out for something on their turn while we're tapped low. But we get Stubborn Denial like that, put the 4th counter or the 2nd counter on our Cutthroat, and just turn it into a ferocious threat. Super, super awesome. Like, you can see where this card has a lot of potential to just close out the game. So, opponent goes for a Surgical Extraction on my counterspell. I decided to fire off the counterspell on the Surgical because I'm going to lose the counterspell anyway if I let the Surgical resolve. I don't have Drown in the Lock held up, so they just know that I have nothing up on their turn. which I don't have anything up if I counterspell, but at least they don't know my hand. So I'd say it's kind of free, but either way, opponents just got like a couple archive traps. We got a Drown in the Lock. Don't care. They're dead to a Brineborn Cutthroat. The real OG. On to round number 2. So again, lose a die roll. Opening hand. Let me rewind and double check that mole decision. What was my thought there? My thought is that I have 1 land and no cantrips. All right, good thought. Move on. The 6 does have some lands, has Wraith, has Counterspell. Bogles. Bogles in the year of our Lord 2023, and some enchantment that I've never seen before that basically says your opponent can't gang block something. You can't block with more than 1 creature. So we do get to hold up Drown in the Lock. Unfortunately, our opponent has no cards in their yard, so we just got to resort to this counter spell instead. Hope that they don't have the follow-up Daybreak Coronet, which they do. Fortunately, they only have 1 card in hand, and this Glade Cover Scout's not like ridiculously huge. So at least we have a couple turns to maybe find like a shadow or to get our yard big enough to get a Murktide that can outgrow the Glade Cover. Any of those would be reasonable. Oh, look, a shadow. And now that they have cards in their yard, we can Drown in the Lock to fight over anything. We can also get down a Murktide and hold up Counterspell here. Actually start getting on the offensive. I made the comment before this match started that this matchup looks absolutely impossible because I can't hold up Counterspell for a 1-drop. I don't have a way of countering a 1-drop creature. And I've got a bunch of targeted removal. On second thought, I feel like it's not as bad as I thought it was. It's not good, but I don't think it's quite as atrocious of a matchup as I was initially expecting it to be, especially once I realized I've got Dress Down in my deck. So now I've got a way to flash in Dress Down to take something off of Hexproof and allow me to kill it. So we get to do stuff here like Fatal Push a Dryad Arbor, Dress Down to the Glade Cover Scout loses all its abilities, and pop it off with a Drown in the Lock. Attack through. I also could have responded to like uh the ethereal thing that they played by Dress Down and Fatal Push the Glade Cover. I knew they didn't have any other cards in hand, so all results like go to the same path. So there's not really a reason that I went one over the other. Now, unfortunately, my opponent getting an Ethereal Armor and a Rancor and having just big first strike trampling Glade Cover means I could be in a lot of trouble. Then I don't have a Ferocious Shadow, which means this Griff's Boon gets down safely. And here, I know that I can't Archmage's Charm to steal the Griff's Boon since it's already equipped into a creature and I don't get to re-equip it. But I figured, you know what, like, I might as well check for science. I'm not perfect. I misunderstand rulings all the time. Let's just give it a shot. But here, game 3, we do have a Dress Down. We've got Consider. We've got some ways to get some redraws going on. Find our land drops. We've got a Shadow. So I feel okay with like Dress Down and Drown in the Lock. We Thoughtseize and see Audacity, double Daybreak Coronet. So we take the Audacity, hoping that my opponent won't be able to like find a 1-mana enchantment right away to be able to Daybreak next turn. Unfortunately, they do find the Ethereal Armor there, so I know that they can Daybreak, but I do have Counterspell, so it's not a terrible situation for me. Like I've got Dress Down to potentially take out a blocker of some sort. I'm not afraid of just being killed here, which is why I'm being a little passive, getting my attack in. Like I'm not afraid of this crackback swing because I know I've got Dress Down to maybe take out something. They're down to 1 card in hand. I don't know what it is, but I figure I've got the removal spell. There's a reasonable chance that I might find something else, which I do. And now we're just like, I say in top deck mode. It's not like really top deck mode because we do have the Fiery Islet and we have a creature in exile. And now we've got an EE, so reasonable spot to be in. Opponent's going to have to either choose if they want to put anything on this glade cover to speed up the clock, or if they're okay just taking 3 every turn. Um, yeah, just solid draws all around. Like we can now kill a glade cover, petty theft something, counterspell one of their 2-drop creatures, whether it be like light paws or what's the other one? But if they're just going to attack for 1, then I'm just going to flash in the borrower and like hold up my EE. And now I've got the ability to kill the glade cover, counter anything that they could protect the glade cover with. I've got lethal with my brazen borrowers. I did not talk about sideboarding in that matchup. I'm pretty sure my only changes were I brought in the dress downs and the EEs and the extra stubborn denial, and I took out a couple of the spot removal spells, like 2 of the fatal pushes. I figured since I had dress down, I didn't want to take out all the spot removal, but I took out a couple of fatal pushes, took out a couple Archmage's charms, and I think I took out a Murktide expecting Rest in Peace, but we didn't see Rest in Peace. Either way, match 3, we're on the draw against Burn. Uh, we do have a Shadow in our hand, which is pretty positive, but the rest of it's kind of meh. Important, since I'm going to Fatal Push, I do want to fetch and shock on my turn to play around, what's it called on their side? The thing, the spectacle card, not light up the stage. You know what I'm talking about. Either way, opponent gets an Eidolon down. I could have played the Shadow out and triggered the Eidolon and gotten the Shadow down as a 1/1, but I don't want to just like hang it out to dry there. So instead, we're just going to get it down, hit in for 1, be really, really passive with our life total. I've got all these counter spells, so like the last thing I want to do is just give my opponent like free damage. They're going to have to fire off spells eventually, or they're going to die to the Shadow, so like the onus is kind of on them. Obviously, I'm dead to triple burn spell. I'm also dead to Goblin Guide plus Boros Charm and Bolt, or some crazy combination like that. You know, that's how it be sometimes. Sideboarding against Burn, taking out a bunch of Street Wraiths, like all the Street Wraiths, and then I'll usually trim on Thoughtseize, bring in Fluster Storm, the extra Stubborn Denial. Usually bring in like EE in case of Sanctifier on Vec. Little less troublesome in Dimir, but still kind of annoying. So very, very slow developing game here, but we do get a Shadow down here with a whole whopping 1 power. Since my opponent's has Searing Blaze, I kind of figure they don't know this interaction because I'm not. All right. Let me pause to go over some of the thoughts real quick. My opponent left in Searing Blaze against me when all they saw was Death Shadow. I understand Searing Blaze if you're up against like Grixis and you see Ragavan and Darcy, maybe Ledger Shredder. But if you only see Death Shadow and blue and black lands, I'm not trusting you, and you leave in Searing Blaze, I'm not trusting you to know the interaction with Shadow and Searing Blaze. So that's why I'm playing out a 1/1 Shadow into my opponent's fetch land, because they obviously want to Searing Blaze. They want to hold up mana for Searing Blaze. And the fact that because like they've got the Eidolon in hand and they don't go for the Eidolon, they hold up mana for Searing Blaze. So this is clearly the thing that they're interested in doing. So because of that, I'm going to play out the Shadow. If you don't know the interaction, when Searing Blaze deals damage, it deals damage to both the Shadow and the player at the same time, or the creature and the creature's controller at the same time. Once the damage is done and Searing Blaze goes to the graveyard, Shadow looks and says, okay, I've got 3 damage on me. Now I need to check if that's enough to kill me. How big should I be? Well, it doesn't matter that I was at 1 when it was cast. How big am I now? Oh, controller's at 9. I should be a 4/4. Cool. I'm a 4/4 with 3 damage on me. Deal. If it worked the opposite way, if the damage was, or if the power and toughness was checked and then the damage was dealt, then Shadow would die. But not how it works. So I kind of bait my opponent here into casting this Searing Blaze. So now I just have 2 hard Stubborn Denials and a Drown in the Lock to hopefully let me close out the game. 3 Stubborn Denials and a Drown in the Lock to hopefully help me close out the game. So I'm pretty fine with aggressively using these counter spells. If my opponent's got like Skewer the Critics or something, I really don't want to unlock that by letting them just hit me freely. Second Shadow seems pretty decent when you can still hold up your double counter spells. There was an argument here. My opponent throws a Boros Charm at me. I'm at 9 life. They've got 3 cards in hand. There's an argument to just letting this Boros Charm go. And just saying, like, all right, now I've got lethal. I've got 2 counter spells. I'm at 5. You're going to have to resolve 2 spells to kill me. And you've got 3 cards in hand, drawing up to 4. So you can't cast more than 3 spells, right? Which you'd have to cast 4 to actually kill me. I like that argument, and I probably should have put more thought into it in this spot. But I was also kind of thinking, like, I'm okay going an extra turn here. And if I had thought about it more, then I could have had just like a guaranteed lethal right there. Because if they play out if I'm at 5 life, they play out the Eidolon. I don't play a land or anything, go to my turn. I can cast Drown on the Eidolon. I lose 2, go to 3. Even if they respond with a spell, then I get to counter that spell, go to 1. If they don't respond with a spell, then I just have 2 lethal shadows because I'm attacking for 12. But at the time, like when I decided to cast the counter spells on the Boros Charm, I didn't know that they were going to follow up with Eidolon and no land drop. So I think there's definitely merit to either line. But either way, we're on to game 3. Swift Spear cracking in. Luckily, we find a push. Even if we didn't find a push, like we still just have a shadow coming down pretty quickly. But obviously, push helps out a ton. If our opponent wants to be aggressive and cast spells at us, that's okay. If they want to be passive and let us go to our turn, then we can get down a shadow, hold up a counter spell of some sort. Go for the EE here so that if they want to chip in damage, they can. If they go for like prowess triggers, I might just counter spell, untap, crack EE, play the shadow. But if they just go for like a chip 1 here, that's a-okay with me. I'll just wipe the board into turn, let them resolve whatever they want, untap with shadow and a counter spell, and know that my opponent's got to resolve multiple spells to kill me here. And once I untap again, I get the Drown as well. So now they've got 3 spells. I've got double counter. They have to resolve multiple things to kill me. Unless they have a Boros Charm. But big reason to counter the, what's it called? The Skull Crack there is if I let it resolve, going to 1 puts me dead to Swift Spear, let's see, Swift Spear, Goblin Guide, Eidolon plus a spell. So they can just like play Eidolon first. I have to counter that. Because if I don't, then just follow it up with a spell and I can't counter the spell or I die to the Eidolon trigger. So you do kind of have to counter anything they put on the stack. Luckily, we are able to counter enough to stay alive and protect our shadow. So this is match number 3, 4. Kind of looks like 3, maybe 4. I don't know. We see Ketria Triome, assuming we're up against some sort of like 4 or 5 color pile. No companion, so probably not elementals. Could be creativity, could be rhinos. Either way, we've got a bunch of interaction for anything that they got going on. Ice, so rhinos, the basic forest pretty well gives it away. We've got stubborn denial up, so we're kind of hoping to bait a violent outburst here, which we do. So we do get to soft stub a crashing footfalls on their turn. And now we're just like hoping that we can get down cutthroat, maybe hold up some interaction. Opponent goes for a shardless agent, which we get to go for the Archmage's Charm. And I learned a valuable lesson here. And it's that a lot of these teamer lists right now are apparently running like 3 or 4 main deck copies of Mystical Dispute. I had no idea of that whatsoever. I've only seen a bunch of these like 4 and 5 color Leyline Binding Rhinos lists, and I had no idea that Mystical Dispute in the main was something I should even care about. So I went for like Cutthroat, Steal a Rhino, and they had another Mystical Dispute. And yeah, I don't think I'm ever going to beat double Cascade Spell, double Mystical Dispute in my double Archmage's Charm start. But either way, we get to go to game number 2. Board in like the Fluster Storms, the extra stub, the EE. Board out things like Dress Down, Fatal Push, a couple Fatal Push, couple Dismember. Opponent goes for our turn 2, tap us down with Violent Outburst, or tap us down with Fire and Ice, which is fine because we get to untap and hold up Stubborn Denial and Flusterstorm. And they don't find a third land, which is huge for us. So now we can't get down a Murktide just yet. Even if we'd shocked in, we couldn't play the Shadow, so I think it's fine to not shock there. We just need to find like another land so we can get Murktide down, but I mean, finding counter spells isn't the worst thing either. We'll soft stub the Fire and Ice, more so they can't draw another card, which naturally doesn't matter if you draw the land anyway. Expecting like a Blood Moon, get a Murktide. At least we can fight over that. It's not pretty to have to fight over a Murktide, but got to do what you got to do. Opponent's going to pass with their Brazen Borrower up, so naturally we're going to find a whole bunch more Murktides. We do get one down, and we can at least hold up Flusterstorm for Petty Theft. And even if they do, like, go for the Petty Theft, untap, go for the Rhinos, then we just have, like, a reasonable clock with Murktide. We get Shadow down. We've got a second Murktide to get down. So we're not in bad shape. Not in good shape, but like as long as we don't get hit with 3 Rhinos, we're okay, right? And since we've got lethal in the air with our 2 Murktides, we don't really need to play out another Murktide. We no longer have lethal, but we top deck an Otawara, and it doesn't matter. Pretty crazy back and forth game there. On to match number 3, or game number 3. Sorry. It is a one lander, but we've got a Wraith and a Consider on the draw, so like I don't feel bad about keeping this. Stubborn Denial is a fantastic pickup. Find the second land off the Wraith, so we're kind of cooking with peanut oil now. Consider finds a Drown in the Lock, absolutely. Anything that counters a pack of Rhinos is pretty good to me. Can't quite get down a threat. Just hoping that our opponent does go for a Rhino right here. Go for a Cascade spell. If they don't, we might be in a little bit of trouble. Especially if we don't find a land. But All right. So endurance, I could have gone for just like let them endurance and fatal push, but I really want the ability to cast this Murktide. Since I'd have to take a full on hit from the or from the rhinos before I could get Shadow down. I'd rather just have the ability, like I said, to cast the Murktide. Unfortunately, we still can't find the land, so not a great situation for us. They do have an ice. I uh stub the ice there so that I can play out double shadow. If I don't play out the double shadow, if I just play out one and my opponent has any sort of like tap effect or bounce effect for the shadow, then they kill me with the rhinos. So playing out the second shadow doesn't change any of that. Like I lose more life to get a second body on board. I'm still in a position where if they have any sort of bounce effect or a tap effect, I'm dead to the rhinos. So I might as well just like make them have it and put myself in a better position if they don't. And they top deck a land for an Otawara of their own. So live by the Otawara, die by the Otawara. We got them game 2. They got us game 3. I get the yeah. Trying to get the little time thing at the bottom to go away. Is it going to come on? Go away. There we go. All right. Match number 1. So this is game or match 5. Game number 1. We do Thought Seize and see a seasoned Pyromancer, Fury, and a Shardless Agent. So it's another Rhinos opponent. Um, the stress down here is more just because I like aggressively want the land drops. I can counterspell the seasoned Pyromancer the next turn anyway. I don't care so much about the Fury. I just want to hit lands. Unfortunately, we miss. So very likely our opponent's got like a violent outburst here. But we find a land, so who cares about a violent outburst if you have lands, right? And petty theft or brazen borrower, sorry. That's fine. That is a-okay. We're gonna have a Murktide that dwarfs that pretty quickly. Go for the Archmage's Charm to draw some cards because I would rather get like some more stuff. I've got the threats. I've got most of the interaction that I need. I just need like things in hand so that I can double spell more often. Don't have to tap off of counter spell. I thought about just firing off a cutthroat. Because like there's been several times this game that if they had a rhino, I feel like they would have cast it and they haven't. So either way, get down to Murktide. Have Stubborn Denial up. Can't do anything about the Seasoned Pyromancer now, but whatever. Stub the dead right there so that they can't double it up with a Fury Evoke and kill my Murktide. And with like Counterspell and Drown in the Lock and all this, I should just be able to close out this game fairly easily. Also just got a bunch of mana, so why not throw down a Brineborn Cutthroat, you know? Maybe give myself a little lethal here. Never mind. It's just like Otawara's day to shine, right? But regardless, I do get to start fighting over some stuff on their turn, which means this Brineborn Cutthroat gets to grow. Oh, we can counter that too. Deal. Ah, so many petty thefts. But that's pretty okay. Like we still have Cutthroat, we've got Murktide. I have the ability to just like double spell threats here. So even if my opponent has some rhinos here, I do just get to like fly over them with the Murktide. Not a whole lot they're going to be able to do with 2/8/8s on the battlefield. I'm not sure I talked about I did talk about sideboarding with rhinos. Same kind of thing here. Boarding out like a dress down, some dismembers, some fatal pushes. bring in EE, the extra stub, fluster storms, all that sort of stuff. Um, I might bring in the extra brazen borrower. I wouldn't against like 5-color rhinos because I'm not so afraid of Blood Moon. But against Temur rhinos, I might be more inclined to bring in the extra borrower. But here we know our opponent's got like an endurance and fire and ice and blah 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 blah. Usually a fan of just stubbing fire and ices if I can. Sometimes you get punished by your opponent having like an immediate what's it called, rhinos. But in this case, I know they don't have a rhinos, or I know they didn't after I thought seized because I took the violent outburst. Their hand was pretty weak, so like I was kind of okay just letting them have rhinos if they had it there because I could still like petty theft, take 4, play a Murktide, something like that, and be relatively okay. And since they just main deck or main phased endurance, yeah, you got it. Petty thefts 4 days. Since they're tapped low here, I'm just going to take the opportunity to kill off the endurance. Might not matter, but I've got like nothing else going on. Hold up this fetch land because I don't know if I need to fetch and shock or if I need to just like fetch up a basic yet. Um, I know fetch patterns is something that a lot of people have trouble with. And usually, if you can avoid it, waiting until the last possible minute to make a decision on a fetch land's the best course of action you can take. Like, for example, here, if my opponent plays Blood Moon, I want a basic. But if they play like, oh, what's it called? If they play a Rhino and I find a Shadow, I want to fetch and shock. So if I make that decision too early, I take away my ability to have any sort of flexibility there. But we do finally find the land, so at the very least, I get to jam a Murktide here, counterspell their Mystical Dispute. So I've got the better board presence. Unfortunately, they do have spells. Ooh. We don't care so much about this season Pyromancer. Play out the Otawara so I can at least double spell with like the Cutthroat here. But more importantly, I just have a lethal attacker in the air plus an Archmage's Charm to protect it. So I'm hoping that's going to be enough. Another important lesson on counter spells. So, opponent's got 7 mana. They go to hard cast a Fury. The Fury does not matter. The Fury doesn't kill my Murktide. Um, they have to have something to follow it up because it's not blocking my Murktide. So there's no reason to fire off this counter spell on the Fury. Like, I don't care if my Murktide has 4 damage as long as the Murktide's not dead. So I have 2 options. If I counter the Fury, then you're right. The Fire and Ice can't kill my Murktide. Murktide lives. It cracks in for lethal. But they could ice my Murktide on my turn, tap me down, draw a card, give themselves another chance to find something that I can't deal with. And between like the Brazen Borrower and the Cutthroat, I should be able to deal with most everything, but there's always the chance that I can't. So instead of even like letting that be in the discussion, I can just let the Fury resolve because they have to have something else to double up with the Fury to deal with my Murktide, and I'll just fight over that. And yeah, you got a Fury on board that I don't care about, a Fire that I get to counter, and a game that I get to win. So let's talk about the deck. Since I feel like that's the part of this anybody's actually interested in hearing. 4-1, very very big letdown of a league. I know. Unfortunately, we did pick up that loss to Rhinos in round number 4. We got a little revenge in round number 5 by taking out another Rhinos opponent, but that will not take away the sting of defeat. But we are currently 14-1 with this list at the time of recording. So that's pretty sweet. Brineborn Cutthroat. We didn't see it that much that league. It did pick up a win against Mill and a win against something else. So like it was in there in the mix. We got to see it cast a couple times. Um, Ironically, like this league, it was showing up more as just like a flash 2-1, where in previous leagues it's grown a lot more. But we did have opponents like casting stuff on our turn, which obviously makes Cutthroat a little worse, but still just like a good additional threat. But I just want to point that out because there are leagues like this where Brian Bourne is almost exclusively a worse Snapcaster mage because it doesn't grow. But we did have like a time against Mill where Brian Bourne got to grow a couple points, turn on Stubborn Denial. So I would say it's better than Snapcaster more often than not if getting a bigger threat is your goal, but worse than Snapcaster at if having a 2-for-1 is your goal, if that makes sense. But I really value like Stubborn Denial, and having Brian Bourne as an additional threat that turns on Stubborn Denial is pretty cool. Other than that, yeah, whole deck looked amazing, perfect. Nothing you can possibly change to make it any better. That is all sarcasm. I know we're past April Fool's Day, but please don't take that as being serious. Flusterstorm's good. Subtlety is still like the card that I'm very much on the fence about. And same thing with Turok. Like we had an opportunity against, I think, Burn to kick a Turok and didn't because we'd rather just hold up mana. And I think that's really kind of the MO with Turok is I think in this deck there's very few times that we're going to want to kick a Turok instead of holding up mana. So I might try to find something else for that spot. Uh, and then subtlety, I'm just like not seeing matches that I want subtlety in. So I wouldn't mind that spot being an additional Shieldred's Edict. So we have a little extra insulation against planeswalkers, against scam threats, things like that. And maybe the Turok could become I don't know. I wouldn't even hate like a duress or something. Something for like the control matchups. Maybe an extra unlicensed hers. Whatever. There's some options. But anyway, hope you enjoy the video. Hope this gave you some good ideas for your next like Dimir Shadow FNM. Hope you catch one of the live streams. We'll have the link down below. Check out some of the other YouTube videos we've got. And again, feel free to hit the subscribe button. Yeah, subscribe button. You know, words. But I'll catch you back live later. Have an awesome rest of your day. Adios for now.